And that's Tom Marshall that has accepted to be our second speaker. He's, as you may have seen from the invitation, a young person and a very committed one, former consultant and innovation consultant, CEO of a personal development company, and engaged in climate activism. So, Tom, if you'd like to come in now.
Thank you, Antoine, for that introduction. We're here today because we believe business can play a key role in solving our climate and ecological crisis. And we all want to know how. Underpinning our belief in business, we hold an unspoken assumption. Neoliberalism is the system that can solve our crises. All my life, I've shared this belief. I studied economics and completed a master in innovation management at one of Europe's top 10 business schools. I worked at Deloitte for 4 years as a strategy and innovation consultant, striving to live by the purpose of our firm, make an impact that matters. I attended One Young World, the Davos for millennials, the largest global gathering of young leaders using business to solve societal challenges. My picture was even hung at the real Davos, with world leaders walking past the corridors, past my belief that profit and purpose can exist in harmony. I desperately wanted to believe that business would be the answer to our climate and ecological crisis, but it's not. At least, not in our existing economic system. That's tough to admit, because it invalidates my long-held worldview, my educational choices, and my career so far. I can imagine it's even harder for you folks to accept, because many of you have lived decades of your working lives based on this system, with honorable intentions to make a positive impact. Now, I don't have decades of experience in the business world. I'm not an expert researcher or an economist, but I don't have to be, as the evidence is undeniable when you look at it with fresh eyes. I'm just a citizen of our planet who cares deeply about humanity, as you do. So where's my evidence? How has business in our current system failed to address our climate crisis so far, and why will it continue to fail? Firstly, let's acknowledge that until now, we have failed. Global CO2 emissions are still rising despite our climate agreements. 3 decades of failed leadership from politicians and international organizations. Wasted time from misplaced faith in neoliberalism. Now the emission reductions required are so steep, so our transition will be far more painful than was necessary. Even if current targets from the Paris Climate Agreements are met, which, by the way, only Morocco is currently on track to do so, we are on course for a catastrophic 3.2 degrees of warming. So what is this economic system that we have wrongly expected to deliver change? The anthropologist David Harvey defines neoliberalism as a theory of political economic practices, proposing that human well-being is advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms and skills with strong private property rights, free markets, deregulation, and individual responsibility. The market is a powerful river that has flowed riches to us over the years. It's lifted hundreds of millions of people out of absolute poverty. It can be a force for good, but within our economic system, its strong current has prevented well-intentioned businesses and professionals from solving our climate and ecological crises. I'm going to tell you 4 reasons why that is. Number 1, corporate executives must maximize shareholder value. 181 US CEOs may have signed on to promote an economy that serves all Americans, but we know how executives make promises they don't deliver, and I don't blame them. Their pay packets are tied to increasing shareholder value. And if they fail this objective, they're just replaced. Research showcases how the river of the market drowns environmental initiatives. To begin with, there's a framing phase where executives prevent climate change as a strategic issue and discuss solutions. Then a localizing phase. Managers implement practices of eco-efficiency, green products and services, and promote climate action. But over time, these initiatives are criticized by managers and shareholders, entering the final normalizing phase. Sustainability initiatives are cancelled and market concerns prioritized. Executives realign climate initiatives with the dominant corporate logic of maximizing shareholder value. Sounds familiar, right? Number two, innovation by companies is failing in multiple ways. Companies direct their investment towards maximizing profitability, often at the expense of the environment. The fossil fuel industry is still using the best engineers in the world to take more oil and gas out of the ground. As of 2020, total investment ever in renewables from these companies is less than 10% of their total investment in just a single year. Companies don't make the large investments required also because of the financial risk. For years, we've been told that the market is a more efficient driver of innovation. But research from economist Mariana Mazzucato shows that the private sector only finds the courage to invest after an entrepreneurial state has made the high-risk investments. Every technology that makes the iPhone so smart was government funded. The internet, GPS, touchscreen, even Siri. Companies are actively choosing not to invest in creating long-term value. Instead, they're using profits to buy back their own shares, increasing shareholder value. In 1982, companies spent less than 0.5% of their profits on buybacks prior to neoliberalism. But in 2018, that share had jumped to 65%. Even if the market was investing in the right things, it's far too slow. After invention, market deployment can take 2 to 3 more decades. The researchers from this paper say it's unlikely that inventions from research this decade will make a material contribution to reducing carbon emissions before the mid to end of the 2030s at the earliest. But we have a steep pathway to prevent the dangerous effects of climate change. We don't have the time to allow the flow of the market to implement new technologies at their pace. Governments and collective entities can sometimes move faster than businesses and individuals. Number 3, there are unseen costs of doing business that are disregarded. Public goods like the ocean, forests, and the air have a free rider problem. No one owns it, so we can't prevent anyone from enjoying it. And there's no incentive for people to pay for it or compensate the destruction of it. It's beyond the market mechanism. The multiple dimensions of sustainability are also ignored. When the neoliberal bastion of the EU targets net zero by 2050, far too late, as you've seen in the graphs, it focuses on its own production of carbon, not its consumption. The EU imports steel from China, lowering European produced emissions while increasing those in China. Fourthly, and finally, we have fundamental incumbent power dynamics at play. Those benefiting from the status quo have been tasked to change it. Why would those in power want to change? Companies and leaders want to do more good, but they won't do less bad. They're not willing to make sacrifices, and they don't have to. They're the ones in power. Our system enables businesses to exploit the resources of our planet, creating the multiple crises we are in. They then expect to be forgiven by giving something back through pitiful CSR programs. One day of social impact is nothing compared to 365 days of planetary and human exploitation. So 4 problems of neoliberalism, and many more which I don't have the time to discuss. Number 1, executives are bound by shareholder value. 2, innovation by companies is failing. 3, there are unseen costs of doing business. And 4, incumbent power dynamics. What can we do? You're all here today because you care You're well-intentioned human beings in the business world who want to be on the right side of history. I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We must redirect the powerful flow of the markets in a new system. The good news is, neoliberalism is a recent idea. Before that, we had a different system brought into existence by a global emergency, World War II. Strategic industries for that emergency, like coal and steel for the war effort, were not allowed to fragment and be driven by private interest. They needed to serve the public interest, so they were brought under national ownership. The centralized coordination needed to change during emergencies was never achieved through fragmented private enterprise, and it's not fair to expect that from companies and executives who are driven to maximize shareholder value at the cost of everything else. Now we have the climate emergency. We need a new common sense, but it's already happening from a different emergency, COVID-19. The UK and US, the palaces of capitalism, are pouring public money into supporting businesses rather than letting them fail. State intervention is on the way back. In the 60s and 70s, so I'm told, it was normal to have public platforms run by public companies. Think roads, trains, energy. Companies can compete on platforms provided with a mixed economy where business and citizens live in harmony. Without rampant capitalism distorting markets and exploiting citizens, but also without an overbearing state that removes the necessary private reward to effort and innovation. From public goods to public interest, taking a stakeholder view of a business, recognizing the other parties involved beyond the shareholder perspective. You might feel overwhelmed listening to all of this. I felt overwhelmed having these realizations, to feel like a tiny ant in a gigantic interlocking system beyond our control. And it's unfair to expect that we can single-handedly change our economic system. But we need to do our part. I strive to live by this quote from Václav Havel, the former president of Czechoslovakia. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. So, what can you do? Get organized. Build a coalition of the willing in your organization, in your industry. Practice a collective bottom-up theory of power rather than an elite top-down theory that's more intertwined by the status quo. Amazon Employees for Climate Justice is a good model for this. In Europe, we must take advantage of our workers' rights. Co-create a plan for what your organization should invest in and de-invest in, and how you want your leadership to be incentivized. Get together and petition your leadership. Stop waiting for the supposed experts to do it and do it yourself. Figure out where the money is going. If you work for a publicly listed company, look up what percentage of profits went into stock buybacks over the past years compared to what percentage went back into innovation. Demand investment in innovation to reduce emissions. Get to know your workers' council or equivalent body in your country. Here in the Netherlands, they have a legal function to promote environmental care. Join a trade union to put pressure on industry bodies and the government. In most countries, you're protected and you have the right to join a union. We must lobby for regulation that can better direct the flow of the market with policies like carbon taxes. Become a climate activist. I'm part of Extinction Rebellion, a growing global environmental movement, and there's a place here for everyone. Give this talk to your network. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I can send you the slides, the speaker notes, so you can make it your own. Let's move forward together on this journey. These are just my ideas from my activism, reading a few books and desk research. I don't have all the answers, but that's really why we're here today. We are the coalition of the willing. I'd like to close with a quote from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.